Welcome back, everyone, to the Bent Limbs podcast. I am your host, Matt Thielking, and today on episode 7, wanted to give you guys a mid-season update of my hunting here in Michigan. I've had an awesome season, um, and it has also had probably one of the biggest heartbreak moments of my hunting career. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you guys. But first, before we do, I did want to give you guys an announcement of, I think since the last time we talked, I don't think I've shared this yet. I did get accepted to the Serious Archery Pro Staff team, or field staff team, I should say. So I'm really excited about that. It's a group of products that I really like and that I've been using now for 2 years. It was one that I had to apply for, and I was really excited that I got it. I really truly do believe that their arrows, their bolts are the best on the market, especially that Sirius Phoenix bolt. You guys have heard me talk about that a ton. I absolutely love it. So I was very honored, very blessed to have Seth accept me onto their field staff team. So just wanted to throw that out there to you guys and let you guys know that because I'm excited. I hope you are too. But let's start talking hunting, man. Like I said, I've had a awesome season. I guess just in general, I have seen, man, I don't even know how many bucks this year, and most of them have been small bucks, but just the number and the number of different ones and the number of hunts where I have seen a buck, I would say is probably, if not the most ever, it's right up there. Behind my house, I saw, I think, 4 different bucks, a few bucks multiple times. I didn't have many empty sits. I didn't have many sits where I got skunked. I didn't see anything. I mean, I really had a lot of sits where I was seeing deer, seeing bucks. I just wasn't seeing what I was wanting to shoot during archery season. And I did have quite a bit of meat left over this year from last year, which is awesome. I had a great year last year. I killed 3 deer. All 3 of them were big. 1 buck and 2 really nice sized does. So we had a good amount of venison at the start of the season where I had kind of made up my mind that I didn't, even though I like to, I didn't want to shoot a doe early, um, just because we didn't really need one. And looking back, I kind of wish I would have just to get a just to get a kill under my belt. But right off the bat in the season, I was seeing does and some small bucks, and I have 2 new properties this year, both of which I had some cameras out on. You've probably seen a couple of the bucks on them from my Facebook or Instagram page, but there were 4 bucks in there that I had said, would be on my hit list. And one of them was the biggest one. He's a 3.5-year-old 8 point. My son, actually, I had him name all the deer because I'm really not very good at naming deer. I'm not that creative. I usually just number them. So I asked him what he wanted to name these deer. So there was, I guess, from biggest to smallest, there was Bucky, Deary, Crabby, and Stinky. Those are the 4. Bucky, the big 8 point. Deary was a 2.5-year-old 10. He's probably one of those bucks that, you really should pass, but man, he was a really good 10 point that I would shoot. And then the other 2 were kind of tall. I think they were probably 2.5-year-olds. They might have been 3.5-year-olds, but likely 2.5-year-olds. Both 8 points. So started off the year not really hunting that property, but just kind of ping ponging around a little bit. One property is more field edge, so I hunted that a decent amount early just to kind of get a little inventory, just kind of learn where deer are coming in and out of the field. It has a little bit of like woods and swamp on it, so I wanted to see how they used that. Really the only kind of little sliver or chunk of cover that I could hunt. So I spent some time early there. I spent some time on a couple of public land spots that I've had or that I've found like a year or two ago that are good. I wouldn't call them great, but they're definitely good places to hunt early. There's some white oaks on them. You might get lucky on an early season buck. If not, you're probably going to see some deer, and you're not going to blow up your primo spots. So those, couple of properties were the ones that I was really focusing on early. I wanted to leave my house behind my house alone until late October, and then the other farm that I could hunt where these bigger target bucks were, that was also going to wait likely until late October. So saw a lot of deer. I actually too, I went and I got a saddle this year. I hunted out of that, and I got a ghillie suit. Um, Both of which I would definitely recommend. The saddle, I was just it took me a little bit to get used to hunting out of a saddle, and especially with a crossbow, you definitely gotta practice out of it, or even if you're not shooting out of it, you gotta just get in one and see where you can shoot. Just because with you facing the tree, you've definitely got to be aware of where your limbs or where your cams could hit once your crossbow is fired and those limbs, expand. So it took a little bit to get used to it, but man, I tell you, the ability for me to climb trees and get set up quietly, not fast. I will admit I was not fast, but the um, the stealth factor of it was awesome, and I really like the safety of the saddle, basically being connected to the tree the entire time you're climbing, the entire time you're up there, the entire time you're coming down. I felt very, very comfortable in it. So that was really cool. What was even cooler was the ghillie suit, you guys. If you guys have never tried crossbow hunting, just straight up on the ground in a ghillie suit, highly recommend it because it is super fun. Um, that field edge spot that I was talking about, I did quite a few hunts early in the year where I knew does were going to be on this field, and after kind of a observation sit or two, I could tell where the regular doe family groups were coming out, and I got in this ghillie suit, and I basically pressed up to like 10 yards from the trail that they come out of the woods into the field on, and I I honestly I didn't think the suit would work as good as it did. I was tucked into some stuff up on the field edge, but man, I felt naked from a couple of angles, or I didn't feel like I was covered up very much. Like, I'm used to kind of if I was sitting in just camouflage there, um, I feel like I would have been picked instantly. But it was like they were looking right through me with this ghillie suit when these does would come out in this field. And I mean, I would have 6, 8, 10 of them all 15 to 40, 50 yards all around me feeding in the field, and they would look my direction, and it was like seriously like they were looking right through me. It was so cool. So I got a lot of confidence in both my ability to be stealth um, from an elevated position as well as on the ground early. And so that was good. Those were a couple of things that I wanted to check early season. If I wasn't going to kill anything, these were still spots where I knew I was going to see deer, maybe get lucky on a buck. If nothing else, I was going to test my ability with a saddle and with this ghillie suit. So fast forward to October 17th, I had cell cam pictures of Stinky, one of the tall 8 points. And he was 2 days in a row. Morning going in on this camera in daylight, evening coming out. Same the next morning going in. So I decided on October 17th that I was like, okay, he did this yesterday. He went right back in there again today into this bedding area. I'm going to go set up where I can cover, this trail that he's walking by my cell cam. I hadn't got pictures of Bucky, the big 3.5-year-old eight, in quite a while. And he was a regular throughout the summer and like the early fall of September months. So I felt like, okay, October 17th, wind's good. weather's good. He's in there. He did the same thing yesterday. Let's see if we can put this buck on the ground. And hopefully, if I do, I'm not going to booger up this area too bad if that bigger 8 has, relocated here kind of in early October. So that was my game plan. And I went in there. I got set up next to this creek, which ended up being the kind of the fatal flaw in my setup. But I kept this creek to my east. I was blowing my scent over it. This buck, Stinky, was supposed to come out over on the west side of me. I had a west wind, so setup was good to hunt him. Little did I know, Bucky, that bigger 8, was in there. I didn't have pictures of him, but he was in there, and he, I had a picture come on my other cell cam that was probably 200 yards from the buck that I was hunting was walking by, and I thought it was this same buck, Stinky, that I was hunting. And I was like, dang it, he went the other way. And I was actually texting a buddy, and I was debating whether or not I should get down on that hunt because this area is a little sensitive, or at least I thought it was, and it is. It's not as sensitive as I originally thought, but I was like, should I just get down and get out of here before some deer get, into the fields or where I need to walk out and some of that kind of stuff so I don't booger anything. And my buddy Nick was kind of like, I don't know, man, you're already in there. You don't have a ton of daylight left. You might as well sit it out and just see what happens and learn something, even if that buck, went the other direction. He's out of there. So I did. And, with about 45 minutes of daylight left, a lot of daylight, I hear probably the most like drawn out bellows or grunts that I've ever heard. Just like rah, just like a really long one, and then another one, and then another one, all really loud, really drawn out. And coming down the creek is Bucky, this big 8. And I'm like, holy cow, I had no idea he was in here. And he's basically, the creek is like 25 yards from me, just like me perpendicular to the creek, 25 yards. It's kind of angling to the south where I'm looking, where he's coming from. And I needed to reposition in my saddle because I was facing west, expecting this other deer or some other deer to come out of this other area. I needed to kind of get turned around. So as soon as he walked behind this this big gnarly bush that was in, right at the edge of the creek, right at the edge of these cattails and stuff, I kind of had to make a pretty big move. And I did, and I felt like I was fine because I could not see this deer at all once he got behind that. I mean, he was completely behind it. So I felt like I could make this move. And then he just sat back there. It seemed like forever. It was probably, like, realistically, it was probably 2 minutes. And then all of a sudden he hopped the creek, which I thought at first was good because now he was on my side of it. There was some other cover and some other things that should encourage him to filter closer to me than where I thought I was going to have to shoot him at. But then he just trotted the other way. So I was sitting there, I was like, crap. Did he see me? I mean, I felt like I was smooth. I was quiet. I didn't make any sound. The saddle is super, super quiet. And it was kind of the amount of motion that I had to do to make this move, more than I would like to. But like I said, he was buried behind this bush and in these cattails. Well, I kind of learned that, especially in the evening at that spot, you can't blow your wind over the creek. And my wind was like perpendicular over the creek. So my prevailing wind was not going to him, but throwing some milkweed down, you would see some float right over it, and you would see some follow the creek to the south. So he was using that creek to kind of get wind from multiple directions. So as he was coming up it, he had the prevailing wind from the west, but he also had some of that scent sucking down the creek, coming basically from the north to the south. So he busted me. So I was pretty mad, and I was like, man, I really hope that wasn't my chance at him right there. And come to find out, it wasn't. Um, he I didn't see a whole lot of him for a week or so, but then he was right back in there. I mean, that was his bedroom, and I uh, I went out there again on October 27th, and I tried my first morning hunt there, which I was pretty nervous about because I did not know how to get into this spot in the morning without boogering stuff up. So I actually waited. My plan was I'm going to wait until it's light out, and I'm going to approach from the north, and if I see stuff, I'm just going to stop, set down. I didn't have any particular spot that I wanted to get to. It was kind of more like a observation hunt to see what was going on in the morning and how I could get in there if I, later in the season actually wanted to do a morning hunt. Bucky is in the middle of this giant field. He's probably 50 yards from the road as I drive up, just out in the middle of a field with a doe. And I was shocked because I usually don't see that type of stuff around my house in October. I mean, you definitely are seeing bucks making scrapes, showing up in daylight, that kind of stuff. But him out in the wide open, I mean, basically at a intersection of two roads and this standalone, country home that was carved out of this field. He was like, I could have shot him out of this kid's playset. I mean, he was out in the open. And so I was actually trying to get him to go back to where I could hunt. He was trying to keep this doe. He was trying to push this doe down to where I could hunt, but the doe was wanting to cross one of the streets. So I was just in my truck, and I would drive and I would kind of push them a little bit. And then when I thought they were going to go to that intersection, like the next road, that crossroad, I would quick turn. I was just trying to get them down into this big swampy area that I could hunt. So then I could park my truck without them seeing me and try to slip in there, because clearly this doe is hot for this buck to be out in the wide open in Michigan, at 8:30 in the morning in broad daylight. And I thought I did it. I thought I got him down in there. Quick parked my truck, slipped in on the south side of this area, basically right to where the cover starts, and I just sat down. It turns out they did cross the street, and I was pretty nervous because I knew two guys that were hunting across the street that day, and there was no one in my areas passing on this deer. Absolutely no one. So I was scared that maybe he got killed. And then, the day that was the best hunt that I have ever pulled off, that I pretty much blew, I think, was November 2nd. I was actually sitting at my house. This was the second sit at my house. Had actually a pretty solid 1.5-year-old 6-point walk by, a buck that I hope makes it because he was a pretty good size 1.5-year-old. Walked right by. Deer were cruising. It was cold. Late morning movement was really good, like 10 a.m., 10:30, that kind of stuff. And I get a cell cam picture from that spot where Bucky lives of him going into the bedding at 11 o'clock, and I'm at my house. And I sat there and I debated. I was like, should I go or should I stick this out? Because I've got some really good deer movement happening right now at my house. So I made the call to go because the wind was pretty stiff, and it was a west wind, which is good for where Bucky lives, for where I can kind of hunt. And I had a pretty good idea from the first two encounters where he was bedding. So I got down, ran up to the house. I put my ghillie suit on, and my plan was, all right, I'm going to kind of go into his bubble, into his bedroom. If he is where I think he is, based on my cell cams, I am going to get within 100 yards of him. Um, and I'm going to have to do it on the ground. So I threw my ghillie suit on, took the crossbow, and I crawled through this, basically just like not cattails, but just wet, tall grass. Um, and I had an idea of where I wanted to go. So I guess to like kind of paint the picture of this bedding area, I mean, it's a big, I shouldn't say big. It's a it's just a big bowl, and there's a creek that runs through it. And so if this bowl is just a nice circle, not quite like halfway down the circle, but maybe this creek splits the bedding into like 2/3 and 1/3, and it kind of turns them into like a D shape and a backwards D, 1 2/3, 1 1/3. So Bucky, to my knowledge, was bedding on the smaller side of that creek, and I wanted to get in to basically the bottom like point of the D. So like the creek is the straight part. You've got this kind of like tag elder and willow and ash and all this stuff in swampy areas here in Michigan that kind of make that D, and then there's some cattails that surround it. So he was bedding somewhere in that cover um, on that smaller D shape. So I wanted to get to the bottom point of it because that was the easiest spot for me to access. And there's a couple spots that I had scouted earlier in the year that I actually thought I could hang my saddle in and hunt out of a tree. So I crawl in there. I got that picture at 11. I got there at noon. And it took me a little bit to crawl in, so I was set up at 12:30. I did bump one doe, which sucked because I didn't want to bump anything out of there, but I did bump one doe out of there. She blew. Thankfully, she ran the other direction. And honestly, it was just the perfect day to do this because of how windy it was right at midday. I don't, I don't think Bucky ever heard it. Actually, I know he didn't because, I ended up seeing him. But it wasn't until 6:30, or sorry, 6 o'clock that I saw him. So I laid. I didn't have a chair. I didn't have anything. I basically just sat, kind of Indian style, or like legs to one side or the other, or honestly just laying down in the swamp from 12:30 to 6. Didn't see a single deer during that time. It was pretty rough. It wasn't cold, but I have some lower back issues from sports in high school, so my back was screaming, my legs were asleep. It wasn't comfortable, but I knew this was like if I was going to kill him, this was a really good opportunity and a really good way to do it. So I laid down or kind of sat behind. There was a ash tree right against the creek. So now instead of my wind blowing over the creek, like it was on the previous setup, the wind comes over the creek first, hits me, and blows out towards kind of a section of more open cattails where it's just kind of a sea of cattails. There's really not anything in there, and I'm behind an ash to my left, and to my right, I'm behind just this big clump of grass and briars. So I'm basically shooting in between this like V. It's probably 2 feet wide between that ash tree and that clump, and I'm sitting right behind them. So I had, kind of that like depth of cover in front of me, and it just felt really good. And what I'm looking into is little thicket where you kind of thought you saw him go. And then I kind of want to like scent grid this area. And when they started doing that, he was basically checking off areas based on the dog that then he would radio me and say, okay, this area, I don't think he's in there. If you want to go in there and look for any sign, go for it. So that's what we did. And, I learned a lot about that property walking around in there. But basically, we got done, and the only spot the dog wanted to go back to was kind of that little wet area where there was kind of like an island of brush. So we got done. He kind of radioed me. He's like, "Hey, look, man." He's like, "I never say never, and I never say always." He's like, "But I think this deer's alive." He's like, "I think you just meat wounded him." He was like, "And I'm gonna tell you why. Couple reasons why. One, we're not finding much blood after the point where you guys backed out and called me." He's like, two, that blood definitely looks meat woundy. And he was like, and three, I can tell when my dog is not on a track, when it's on a track, and when it's on a track of a dead deer. He's like, she is definitely on this deer's trail or tracks. But the reason I don't think he's dead is because when she is on the scent trail of a dying deer, those deer put a lot more scent out of their, I can't remember the name of them, but basically the glands in their hooves. She's like, they put off more scent, a lot more of it, and it smells different. And when she smells that, she's almost like she's really excited and she is trying to get more of that scent into her nose. So she's almost snorting as she's going along. He's like, she almost sounds like a pig. He's like, she never did that once. I was like, okay, man, that makes sense. He's like, if you wanted to look around anymore, he's like, he could be in these cattails. If you were going to check this stuff again, I would check right here. He's like, but if that deer's not dead within this block of cattails right here, he's like, that deer's alive. So I checked it a little bit more. Was pretty bummed. Was really bummed. That was the coolest hunt I ever pulled off. Like, I have never done that. I have never crawled into a bedding area midday, sat laid in swamp grass for 6 hours and had a buck of that caliber come out. It was like that was like, it probably still is. It's one of my biggest accomplishments, I guess, as a hunter. Like, that is next level stuff compared to what I have done before. Up and to the point of executing the shot, like I'd pulled off the coolest hunt I'd ever done. And then I honestly don't know. I don't know if I deflected a little bit and just hit him low. I don't know if my my reticle dot like float on him was more, or if I pulled it a little bit. I don't know. It could be a combination of all those three. It could be one or the other. I could have just blown it. Maybe that cattail deflected more. I don't know. But regardless of what it was, I didn't execute. So that sucked. That really sucked. To have an amazing hunt like that on what would be my biggest buck, my number one target buck, and to do that. Good news was 3 days later, got a picture of him right back in there. So he's fine. That picture was another one. I really couldn't tell where I hit him, but he was totally fine. Looked fine. I'm still getting pictures of him. And, today's November 22nd. So that was November 2nd, I should have said too. That was the 2nd of November. So I was really happy that the game with him was going to continue. Um, like I said, I kind of after I, you know, got over my pride hit of blowing that. Um, yeah, my reflection was kind of almost just like what I just said. I was really proud of myself for putting myself in that situation. I was not proud of myself on the execution of that shot. And the execution of that shot is something I can fix. Um, practice, practice more offhand, practice off, uncomfortable. Because hunting this particular spot, similar setups, ghillie suit on the ground type of thing. Um, it's something that I'm going to need to do. And the reason for that is if I do want to go that close to the bedding, a lot of the trees in there are pretty naked. That's why I didn't climb that day, as I was scared if he was bedded in there, he probably would see me climbing a tree. He wasn't going to see me crawling through the grass on a windy day. So fast forward a little bit. So I hunted, there. I hunted my house. I passed on some more bucks. I was pretty determined though at that particular spot. It was going to have to be him or a buck of his caliber, and some of those other ones that I said were shooters, with the exception of what would it be, Deary, the 10-point. The other two I was probably going to let walk now, because I was afraid if I shot one in there, I would blow him out, and he's back and he's in there again. I don't get a deer during bow season. At least regular bow season. Haven't had that happen in a while. And it's not that I couldn't have. I mean, I could have shot a crap load of deer, but I was proud of not shooting them. I mean, the 1.5-year-old bucks that I passed on, those, to me, those were no brainers. Again, it kind of would have been nice, just getting one under my belt prior to that encounter with Bucky, especially a doe, because I had plenty of very good opportunities at nice sized does. So now looking back, I wish I would have done it just because I had kind of the monkey off my back type of thing. Because as bow season wore on and we approached November 15th gun season, my own pressure on myself was building. And yeah, that pressure just continued to build, and then we got to gun season. And gun season in Michigan is a crapshoot, because there are a lot of hunters on a lot of small tracts of land. A lot of deer get killed. If they don't get killed, they figure out what's going on real quick. So your best bet is normally killing a big buck with a bow, at least on the properties that I've hunted. But opening day, I was like, okay, I'm going in there with my gun, and I'm going to set up over here, and I'm going to kind of see what happens. And if I need to, I'm going to sit all day. And I did that. I got in. I got a picture of what I thought was Bucky. It ended up being another really nice 8 that I've never seen before. Literally going into this bedding area as I'm getting to the tree I want to set up in. So this buck pings on my cell camera, and he's like 100 yards away going in there. And at first I thought it was him until I got the HD picture. I realized it was another one. He was actually a little bit bigger. So I'm like, yep, definitely. I'm sitting here all day. So I sat, saw a lot of does early, and a couple small bucks. And then I kind of decided the wind, again, midday wind picked up. I decided to go a little more aggressive. I was sitting more of a transition area between two patches of cover, similar to where like the bedding area where I hit Bucky was. So I'm on the edge of that, but I'm back off of it a little farther to just kind of see cover this other patch that is also bedding, but hasn't been, I don't know, quite as hot, if you will. It's kind of like a travel route between cattails and grass and stuff like that in between these two. So as stuff kind of filters through, or I'm seeing where deer are, I don't see any big bucks, and I'm like, all right, it's noon. I'm going to climb down, stretch my legs a little bit, eat a little lunch that I packed in my pocket, and then I'm going to get closer to this bedding area because I'm like, this buck should be in here. And maybe there's another one or Bucky or whatever. But I'm like, I now want to focus on the deer that I think are in here coming out in the evening. So as does started moving at like two to, and then it really picked up at 4. I actually had a really nice 2.5-year-old come in behind me, basically right where I was, and he caught my wind. He was 100% in range. It would have been a back, shooting back behind me out of a saddle, completely offhand, kind of hanging there. And he was back, 70 yards or so. And it just knowing that bigger one was in there, I was like, I'm not taking this shot. So second day of gun season, I wanted to go back to this spot, but I just kind of felt like being there all day. And I had a couple, that 2.5-year-old, he winded me. I had a doe bust me late that kind of ended the hunt. And then just my scent from being in there all day. I was like, I feel like I should give this take a break. A lot of deer getting pushed around right now. Hopefully, if you don't completely stink this whole area up, hopefully Bucky, this other 8 other deer get pushed into there and hole up in there. So I went to a different property, passed through property. It's a small one. It's one I've been hunting for years. And this is kind of like the teaser video that I dropped the other day on YouTube. It's a property that there's some giants around. There's a lot of deer around, but very few bed on this 20 acres. A couple does maybe, but you're pretty much just catching, like I don't know, quarter mile, half miles worth of travel in between these two bigger bedding areas that are not open to hunting, or just big tracts of land that are not open to hunting where a lot of deer bed. They're filtering in between there, and the big ones, they usually do it once. If you got a picture of them, that's cool. Frame that picture. You're probably not going to see them again. Type of thing. So I sat this stand I call Old Faithful. It sets up on top of a ridge kind of in the middle of this property, and it works well on an east wind. So we had an easterly wind on the second day of gun season. It was a west the first day. So in east, I didn't really know what I would do at that swampy property with Bucky, or with this other 8. But I had an idea, and I hadn't hunted it on an east wind yet, but I wanted to be kind of over by this other cell camera. But again, I just kind of felt like, go somewhere else, let this cool off. Hopefully deer get pushed into there, go to this pass-through property. This pass-through property doesn't get a lot of pressure just because surrounding areas, they can't hunt. There's residential. So I'm like, go there because pressure doesn't happen to the extent there that it does at other spots that I hunt. So went there, 7:30, the first 30 minutes of daylight, I get a cell cam picture from the camera that I was going to sit by. And guess who it is? Bucky, walking right by it. And I was pissed. I was so pissed. I was like, dang it, man. I should have sat there. This is my best spot. I'm seeing bucks at blah, blah. I was just, man, was I mad. Just because he walked right by this, where I wanted to set up kind of based on Onyx, probably would have been a 40-yard shot with my gun. So, man, I was mad. And then I kind of cooled myself off, and I was like, all right, dude, you've done one morning hunt, which was yesterday, and you bumped a deer getting in, and then you bumped some deer at the end of the night. I'm like, you want to approach that spot on an east wind. this way. You've never done that before. You have no idea if you would have bumped deer. Maybe Bucky doesn't even show up on this camera if you go in there, or had you gone in there on an east wind today. So yeah, it sucks. You walked right by there and that's where you were thinking about going, but it's not a guarantee that had you gone there, he still would have walked by. So I was like, just chill out. This property, it's the freaking first 30 minutes of daylight. This property is always really good from like 9 to 11. That like late morning type of stuff. I'm like, and honestly, I was going to shoot a doe too. I was like, if I get an opportunity at a big doe, I'm going to take one. Because the pressure on myself was building and I needed to get something. Man, sure enough, Old Faithful comes through 9:30. I look over and I see just feet moving. I can't tell what it is. And just kind of after watching how it's moving, I can tell it's a buck. Usually the does are just kind of meandering, nice and slow, browsing on a bunch of stuff. This is like, you can see its head's down and it's not like running or anything, but he just looks like a dog, nose to the ground, like smelling stuff, kind of zigzagging all over the place. And so I grunt, and the steer's still kind of head down, but he like turns my way a little bit. So I grunt again, and he does it again. And then like, I mean, I really kind of like laid on this grunt call, not like loud, but just bap, 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 bap. I just kept kind of hitting it. I don't know, trying to sound, I guess, kind of like if another buck was doing that, or if a buck was kind of like chasing a doe or whatever. I mean, every time I hit that grunt call, he was kind of just turning just a little bit my way, nose to the ground, and then finally he just like picked his head up and started trucking my way. I could tell it was at least an 8, or at least I could see like 3 points high on the one side. It looked pretty good. So I'm like, yep, I'm going to shoot this deer. And out there, I mean, I still get excited with 2.5-year-olds, especially out there on this pass-through property. That's what it looked like in, the glimpse that I got of him. So I like quick made my decision. Like, if I get a shot, I'm taking it. He gets into the gap that I have probably shot, I don't even know how many deer out of that stand in this particular gap. As soon as he gets there, I'm, meh, as pretty loud. He stops. He's probably 45 yards. Settled the crosshairs on him, touched it off, and I knew I drilled him right away. He kind of, is all hunched up. He's not moving fast. He gets just out of sight, silent for a couple seconds, and then I hear one last sound. So I'm like, he should be down right there. He's down just out of sight. So I was pretty pumped. And I was texting my buddies and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I just slammed one. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's a 2.5-year-old 8. And then I get down, probably like, I don't know, it's quiet for 15 minutes or so. So I'm like, I'll get down, I'll kind of ease up here and we'll see what things look like. Man, did my heart stop when I can see, I'm at where he's standing. There's dirt kicked up. There's white hair on the ground and there is no blood. And I'm like, Matthew, did you just freaking like belly rake another deer with your gun at 40 yards? I was like, oh, like panic set in. And I'm like, no. And I was like, dude, calm down. You watched how that deer reacted. You didn't, you freaking nailed him. And I've had it. So this gun that I shoot, it's a 44 mag. I shoot Hornady 225 grain. I can't remember the actual name of them, but they're 225 grain, like the Lever Evolution rounds. It's basically the same bullet that my muzzleloader shoots. I just shoot 250 grainers on my muzzleloader, and those bullets, it's either, I mean, they do a great job performance-wise, especially when you are field dressing your deer and like you see what they do. But I've had them where it's either like gushing or it's zero. With both that 44 mag and my muzzleloader, I've had it where it's either gushing or it's zero. but I've never had a deer go more than, I don't know, 60 yards or so with that 44 mag. So I was like, all right, just follow these kicked up leaves. Like you can see where he went and you know he should be right over here. I'm like, just follow that. Don't even worry about blood. If you killed him, he's gonna be dead right up here. And then sure enough, he was. He was laying maybe 50 yards from where I shot him, just out of sight of the stand. Nice. I guess he's technically a 7-point. I actually like to call him a Michigan 12-point because he has 7 scorable points on like a typical frame. What would be, like his 8th point, his G3 on his, what would that be? His right side. It's not quite an inch. I mean, it's like poking up. Um, like if the Michigan old timers said it's a point if you like, or at least my grandpa used to say, or all his old time buddies used to say, like if you can hang a ring on it, it counts as a point. So you could have hung a ring on that one, and then it actually had 4 points coming off, like 4 half-inch bumps or so coming off of one of the brow tines, and you could have hung a ring on all of them. So he's a 7-point, but I like to joke and say he's a Michigan 12-point. Just a solid deer for that property. Going in there, really wanting to kill a doe and a buck would have been a bonus, which it was for that day. Man, was I pumped and was I relieved. Just a good sized deer. He had good mass. I mean, he wasn't huge. He's like, I don't know, 12 inches wide. He had pretty good G2 tine length. He had really tall G2s and a short G3 on the one, and then like the doesn't count G3 on the other, and then that one, gnarly brow tine. But man, I was like, thank you, Lord. I needed that. I needed it quick, and it was. There wasn't a whole lot of monkeying around like the first hit on Bucky. So monkey was off my back, and then I was also really, really happy, to take a 2.5-year-old not at my best property. I'd have done it there all day, especially for my first buck. I'd have done it behind my house. But that property I was really wanting to focus on. If it wasn't that 2.5-year-old, or what I think is a 2.5-year-old nice 10 deerie, it was either going to be Bucky or this other new 8 that showed up. I really wanted it to be a quality buck out of this best property. So I got it done with a gun. Second day of gun season, which usually doesn't happen for me. So that was pretty cool. But that is kind of my mid-season update, man. I was grinding. I was hunting hard. My wife, God bless her, has been just phenomenal, holding down the fort, taking care of our kiddo while I've been gone hunting and pulling some all-day sits or taking vacation or slipping out when I'm like, I think I need to get out there because, camera's been blowing up today. The wind's good. This is happening. She's been amazing. So thank you, hon, if you listen to this. I love you, and I really appreciate you let me chase these things all around. I was so happy to finally get one. It was really cool too to see my son's reaction. This would be the third buck that I have shot since he's been born. First one he was 8 months. Second one, and he doesn't remember that. Second one he was a year and 8 months. I don't know if he remembers that one or not. But this year, just under 3, he'll be 3 in March. He's really starting to understand like what hunting is and what dad does out there. And like, he knows now that, we eat venison and he really likes it. I mean, he's been eating it, since he could eat solid foods, but, we've been teaching him this year that, this is deer and this is, when dad goes hunting, and when dad gets a deer, we eat it because it's really tasty and it's really healthy and, all that kind of stuff. So he's putting all that kind of stuff together. And then this year we've also too, like all summer, we drive around and we scout, look for deer. We drive by some of these properties I can hunt, and especially on the way to daycare in the summer in the mornings where there's green bean fields, we see piles of deer. So he thinks that's pretty cool. Or he's helped me check some cameras. He's done some of that kind of stuff. So he was pretty pumped when Dad got one, and it was pretty cool to see his reaction when he got home from daycare that day. I had the deer all cleaned up, just in the backyard. We took some pictures with him. He thought it was pretty cool, and Dad thought that was pretty cool too. That he really enjoyed it. So guys, that is my mid-season update. That is why I have been so radio silent on here. I apologize because literally I have been working, I have been being a dad, and I have been hunting as much as I can. And it has been a great season. It has been a big relief that not only Bucky is alive, but I finally got it done. And so now my focus, the remainder of gun season here, especially right now, we're a week in. It's pretty dead out there in the woods. I hunted tonight. The weather was really good. We had a little cold front come through. I sat a fairly conservative spot at that good property, hoping that Bucky or that other big eight would be in there. He wasn't, but there are a lot more deer that I've never seen before starting to pile into this spot. So I'm going to kind of keep pressure off, keep monitoring cameras. I really think after this Thanksgiving weekend, a lot of stuff starts to calm down as we exit regular firearm and get into muzzleloader. And then one of my favorite times of the year is muzzleloader, is like the, I don't know, 3rd through the 10th of December. That always seems to be pretty good. But really one of my favorite times is late archery in Michigan, where you can shoot does with guns still on private land, but bucks is bow only from December 14th till the new year, January 1st. And so that like week in between Christmas and New Year's, I really, really like that week. So I'm trying to keep some stuff low pressure, spend time with the family. I might try to do a doe hunt here, or a couple of those, see if I can get one more in the freezer, so at least I know we're good venison wise before I keep going after a few of these nicer bucks, because I really think here weather gets cold, pressure starts dissipating as far as other hunters, either tagging out or hanging it up, and as long as those guys are alive, I'm going to keep chasing them. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly have enjoyed this hunting season. I'm in a lot better mood now that I've got one in. I hope you guys are all having a great season as well, whether you're in archery still, whether you're in regular firearm, whatever season it is for you across the country. I hope you guys are having a wonderful, fun, safe deer season. I hope you're having some success, and, just get out there and enjoy it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't be like me and put all that internal pressure on yourself. It's such a beautiful time of the year still to be in the woods. The fall colors maybe are gone by you, they're gone by me, but any time you can spend out there is a blessing, and it is something that you should just go out there and enjoy. And if you shoot something, that's a bonus. So thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Bent Limbs podcast. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful, fun, safe remainder of your deer season. We'll see you guys again soon.